Hello again YouTube, this is episode 3 of Wheelz Workshop. Today I'm going to be working on my dad's Seat Leon FR. This is the 1.4 TSI model. I'm going to be doing a service for it today, and I'm also going to be looking into an air conditioning problem. So the garage has said that this needs a whole new aircon compressor, but I'm going to see if I can fix it for a fraction of the price by just replacing a sensor. Hopefully I can, but if not, at least I've tried. If you enjoy this kind of content and you're enjoying the series, please leave a like and consider subscribing as well. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it, guys. Let's start on the service. So let's have a look at what the service kit contains. We have 5 litres of oil, a cabin filter, an engine air filter and an oil filter. The only thing really missing is spark plugs, but we'll do them another time. Let's get started by jacking up the car. Okay, so the car is now jacked up and on axle stands. I'm going to show you a little hack. This is an old piece of carpet from the house. So if you're ever doing any house renovation or getting carpet replaced or whatever, ask to keep the old carpet, because what you can do, shove it under the car and it's like you're doing work on your car but in your living room. So it's quite cool actually. So that's a top tip for you there. Okay, so now we're under the car and you can see we have this huge plastic under tray that we need to remove. We need to remove this to gain access to the sump plug. We have a number of T25 screws. There's 4 that side, probably another 4 that side, and some huge T45 screws. There's 3 of those right at the back. Once they've been removed, the whole plastic under tray will just drop down and it will give us access to what we need to get to. There's also one more T25 at the front that I didn't see. There we go, and that should slide out. Okay, now that we're under the car with the tray out of the way, we can see a lot of the important components that we need to gain access to do the service. So here we have the oil filter. Here we have the sump plug. I'm going to loosen that off. As with any Volkswagen product, or pretty much any Volkswagen product I've ever worked on, it's a 19mm bolt. So let's get started draining the oil. Drain pan at the ready. There we are. Quite black, that oil. Definitely due a change. As I mentioned in a previous video, make sure you always got some sort of cloth to hand to get the oil off your hands. Okay, while we're waiting for the oil to drain, let's replace the copper washer on the sump plug. So these are just annealed copper crush washers that I got off eBay, and it's much cheaper than replacing the whole sump plug, because a lot of the time there's nothing wrong with the plug itself. You just need a new washer to make sure it seals. Okay, now the oil has steadied to just a slow drip. I'm going to pop the sump plug back in and snug it up. Now, to be honest, I have in previous videos, like with the Fox, done it up to a torque spec. But to be honest with you, please do follow proper torque specs and everything to make sure you don't strip it out. But generally, as long as it's snug, it's not going to come loose and you're not over tightening it, you can't really go wrong, especially in a steel oil pan, which I think this is. It should be fine. Aluminium oil pans though, you have to be careful because aluminium is not as strong as steel. But yeah, that's nice and snug. Give it a wipe with the cloth. And now we can move on to the oil filter. Okay, so canister oil filters like this can be removed in a number of ways. My preferred method is to use an actual oil filter removal tool like this one, which you just attach to your socket there, and it fits perfectly on the end of the oil filter. Now, because it is just a disposable part, you can also use something a bit more agricultural, like clamps like this, which I have had to do before. They're quite useful, and you can even just hammer a screwdriver through it if you need to get leverage on it. Now, if you can, obviously use a proper tool, but those are other options for you if you don't have one of these tools. But if you have an oil filter that is an element that you have to replace inside a plastic housing, then don't do any of them. Make sure you use the proper tool. But this is a replaceable canister oil filter, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this tool and remove the old one. Right, what I just said about using a tool for the oil filter, I'm not going to be able to do, because I don't know if you can see, but on this oil filter, it doesn't have flats on it like this one. It just has notches. So this tool doesn't actually go on it. So this is why, in many cases, I've had to use an oil filter plier tool like this. It's not a problem. As I say, it's a replaceable part going in the bin anyway. Doesn't matter if you scratch it up, damage it or whatever. So here we go. You can see that's coming loose, and eventually, after about 180 degrees, it should just be loose enough to do by hand. Make sure your oil pan is underneath it. There it goes. Okay, so before you put the new filter on, make sure to remove any plastic cover, because I've seen videos of this online where people have done their oil changes and not removed the plastic protective cover, so they get no oil pressure, of course. And make sure to put a healthy amount of oil on the rubber O-ring or seal, whatever you want to call it, all around the face of the oil filter, and then just screw it back onto the engine. The best thing you can do with these canister type oil filters is just tighten them by hand. Don't use any tools, just with your hands, snug them up, because they don't have a very high torque rating. They just need to be snugged. Very unlikely they'll come loose, and you just want it snug enough so that it doesn't leak. There you are, so just snug it up with your hands and then grab the cloth. The surrounding area are white. One oil filter replaced. So, ordinarily at this point I would put the under tray back on, lower the car back down, and then fill it with oil. However, I still want to have a look at the air conditioning system. So I'm just going to fill the oil now. To find out the capacity, again, I mentioned this in a previous video, use the Castrol Oil Check website. It is so good. Big up Castrol Oil Check. It's so useful for this. Castrol Oil Check tells me that this holds 4 litres of oil, so I'm going to do maybe 3.5, 3.75, something like that, then check it. So let's do that now. Right, can I do this without spilling? Yes. I'm so good at this on camera, I'm usually terrible. Oh, spilled a bit. Damn it. So that's around 3.5 litres. Because the car's not level, I can't really check the level properly. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And then before I start the engine, obviously once the car's back on the ground, I'll check the level. So next, let's do the engine air filter. As far as I can tell, this looks really simple and easy to do. You've got 4 sort of clips around it, so 2 here and 2 at the back, there and there. You've got a vacuum hose, and you've also got another hose here, the intake pipe. Okay, it's nice and easy. There are 2 Phillips head screws underneath. Remove them, then this little lid should come off. So now, I should be able to easily take this apart. Hey, there we go. So there's our old filter. These screws look like they're supposed to be captive, but only one of them stayed in there, so just be aware of that. Grab the new filter, make sure it's the same, take the old one off. Old one's not too bad, to be honest. Might as well do it while we're in here. There we are. Pop the base back on. The correct way round. Just make sure it all clicks into place all the way around, and screw it back together. Before we put this back on, if you did spill any oil when filling it up, use this opportunity while you have access to just clean it. So pop it back into position. Put that hose clamp back on. And you've got this little vacuum hose as well here. And just make sure it's pushed down onto the rubber grommets properly. Hose clamp back on. And there you are. Engine air filter replaced. Right, let's move on to the cabin filter. Okay, so now it's actually time to replace the cabin filter, also known as the pollen filter. This is actually a really important service item because these can get really filthy in a short period of time. And of course, this is the air that you breathe. So obviously it doesn't affect the car as such, but it affects you, the driver. To replace it, start in the passenger side of the car. Here, open the glove box, grab a plastic pry tool. You can use whatever you want really, but just anything that you can use to pry these little tabs with. So little triangular tabs either side of the glove box, one there. As you can see, it's really hard to do with one hand actually, but as you're prying those little triangular tabs, push the glove box down. There's one, there's two, there we are. And as you can see, it has now dropped down. You don't need to remove it as such, just drop it down, that's fine. And the cabin filter housing is this piece here, but quite annoyingly with the way it's designed, it is obscured by this plastic housing for the Easy Connect. In your case, you might not have one of these units. Yours is a lower spec car, but this does have it. So what you have to do is just pull this plastic surround off of the Easy Connect unit, just work it gently. There we are. And you'll see that there's a number of clips that hold it in. So it is quite tight to get out. Quite annoyingly, one of the clips has stayed in there. All right, I'll do that later. Anyway, so now that that plastic panel is removed around the media unit, there are some clips at the top. What you have to do is pry it down slightly. And I'm using pliers just to wiggle it out. What I've also done is just gently bent these bits of plastic at the bottom as well, down. So it is a bit, honestly, it is a bit of a pain to do this, and it often is. Just got one more clip at the top, there's 3 in total. Just grabbed a pick tool to get at that one on the right hand side. There we are, okay. This one was a little bit tricky, but there we are. So you can see at the top, there's 3 clips. So this is what I was prying down on, these 3 here. And these at the bottom are just sort of like hinges, which sit inside these, just sit inside there as like a hinge. So you should now be able to remove this cabin filter. Quite simply, keep note of which way the airflow goes. It goes downwards. Grab the new filter. As you can see, airflow down. That's it. Grab the panel again and clip it back on and bend these little tabs back up. And that's job done. This old pollen filter wasn't too bad, but again, if it's been a couple of years, you will be surprised at how much crap can gather in a pollen filter. Right, so now I think it's probably time to have a look at that air conditioning issue. So onto the air conditioning issue. As I've explained before, this has been to a garage and it has been diagnosed as requiring a new aircon compressor, which is obviously very expensive. I'm hoping today that I can fix it on the cheap, or at least diagnose it on the cheap. Let's get started with that really. I'm about to show you the reason why I think it might be a sensor. Now, I really don't know a lot about these systems at all. I don't even know which is the high pressure side and the low pressure side, but what I do know is how to use VCDS. and VCDS shows high pressure sensor internal system fault. And that says to me that it could be a fault with the high pressure sensor. So to sort of figure out which one's the high pressure sensor to begin with, because I'm not even sure which one it is, I'm just going to unplug the sensor and see if the fault changes. So let's start with that. It could be this one, maybe, who knows. Yeah, right. So that's unplugged. Now I'm kind of hoping it's that one because that's easy to get to. So let's see if there's any additional fault codes or if that fault code changes. Go into auto HVAC, fault codes. There we are. High pressure sensor, no signal. That is bloody fantastic, because that means that this is the high pressure side, which I thought it was anyway. There is also another pressure sensor on the actual compressor itself, which is underneath the car. But yeah, looks like this is the high pressure sensor. So fantastic. So I'm going to get a part number for that, go and get the part, and if I can get it today, I'll fit it and see if that fixes the problem. Right guys, unfortunately, that sensor down there, I can't get today. So I'm going to order it on Amazon. It's going to come tomorrow, so I'll pick the video back up then. But for now, I'm going to finish off the service job. I'm going to replace that under tray, check the oil level, top it up, and reset the service light, which is something I'll show you how to do using VCDS. So let's do that. Okay, time to check the level. Looking pretty good, but we haven't started the engine yet, so it hasn't pumped around all of the oil. So just going to start it up and we'll check the level again in a few moments. So once you perform the service on your car, you're going to want to reset the service warning light, which looks something like this. So you can see that says oil change and inspection now. So obviously once you've done your service and you've inspected the vehicle underneath, you're going to want to reset it. So go into service reminder interval reset on VCDS. Now just to explain, there are other ways of doing this. There's probably ways of doing it on the screen and using the buttons on the dash as well, but I just like to use VCDS because I got it. So it's going to get all the information about the car in terms of the last service. So you can see it's 370 days since the last service. This is the amount of kilometers it's done, etc. We just want to go on this particular car to reset, fix, and ESI, INSP, blah, blah, blah. And it explains it here. It's an oil change service and time distance-based inspection reset. We'll go ahead and do that. Perform SRI, that button there, and it will just go through and perform that service interval reset. There we are, SRI reset complete. Turn your ignition off and back on. No more service light. Fantastic. Right, so there's nothing really much more to do now. Forgot to mention about the inspection part of the service. This is also quite important. It's something that I have already done on this. So on this particular car, I found that there is a leaking shock absorber on the passenger side. The brake pads are a little bit low, but otherwise it's pretty good. Generally, you want to be checking things like that. Your brake pads, your brake discs, check for any broken springs, check the shock absorbers, check all the bushings and the boots. So for like your drop links and all your ball joints and everything like that. Generally, you just want to take a good look at everything. That's what your inspection is really. But generally, this car's pretty good other than a leaking front shock absorber. Could probably do with some pads, but that's about it. It's pretty good underneath.
The next day.
Hello again, it's a new day. Still working on the Leon, and today we're going to be looking at the aircon problem. So as I mentioned before, I've got an aircon pressure switch from Amazon. This was £18 something, and I'm hoping that we can fix the issue just with this sensor. So yeah, as I mentioned, my dad took this to a garage and he was quoted for a new aircon compressor. And I'm hoping that all it needs is this little sensor. So let's see if we can save my dad hundreds of pounds. Let's go. So this is the sensor in question. So it looks like all you need is a 24mm spanner and you can remove it. It's sat on a Schrader valve, apparently. So it shouldn't let any of the gases out, or very little of the Freon out. Just turning it by hand now. There we go. No gases came out at all as far as I could hear. Here's the old pressure switch. And I suppose in goes the new one. Take the little plastic cap off like that. Tighten that down. There we are. That was the easiest sensor change I've ever done. So fingers crossed that works. Okay, so back on VCDS, and we no longer get a high pressure sensor fault with internal system fault. We just get refrigerant pressure too low. So perhaps the refrigerant pressure is too low. Maybe it needs regassing. So I have ran the car up, and unfortunately the air conditioning isn't working. However, I have checked in VCDS once again, and I've had a look in the advanced measuring values, and there's some interesting information in here about the actual refrigerant pressure and things like that. So as you can see, it's showing the refrigerant pressure as 0.8 bar. As far as I've been able to tell from the internet, it should be at least 7 bar minimum. So it's nowhere near the pressure it needs to be. And as you can see, the compressor has been shut off because of a low pressure condition. So it seems that the compressor is probably fine. It's being purposely shut down by the ECU, and it's showing that there isn't enough gas in the system, basically. So I think there's nothing wrong with this compressor, but obviously time will tell. So we'll take it to get it regassed, and we'll see how that goes.
3 days later.
Okay, it's a few days later, and we're back in the Leon again, and I have been to get the AC regassed, and I'm pleased to say that the issue is fixed. If I show you, so here's VCDS again. Here we are now. Refrigerant pressure is now 7 bar. It was 0.8 before. As you can see, there's no error for compressor shut off or any of that. You can see the compressor is spinning, and if I press the AC button, you'll now see the pressure increases up past 8 bar, 9 bar. Compressor is active, it starts pulling load, and most importantly, it is ice cold. So that means this £18 sensor from Amazon saved my dad hundreds of pounds on a new compressor, which is what he was quoted from another garage. Just a very quick rant. As a garage, how could you possibly be so negligent in terms of not checking the diagnostics or doing any basic testing? If I've managed to figure this out with pretty much no knowledge of air conditioning systems and just with a diagnostic tool, then how can you not figure it out? And why are you saying that things like the compressor, the most expensive part of the air conditioning system, the compressor, needs replacing? Why? I just don't know. It's bizarre to me, and it would have been ridiculous if the compressor had been replaced on this and all it was this. I put the plastic covers back on, but this is the old sensor. So anyway, yeah, so thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you like this kind of content, please give me a like. It really helps me out. And of course, if you like the series, consider subscribing. This is episode 3. There will be another episode coming out soon, so stay tuned for that, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.